excited to be joined today by Evan Vieth, a reporter for Inside Texas, covering the Texas Longhorns for On3. Evan, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me on. I'm excited to talk some Texas Longhorns, talk some football going into next season.
Yeah, man, big-time program with big-time expectations. This is a team that everyone's kind of circling to be in the national championship conversation, and rightfully so. This roster is loaded. They've got a great quarterback, a great coach, and with all that comes an expensive roster, too, in this NIL era. So you've got some big-time transfers, big-time recruits. It feels like it's all kind of coming together, but let's start with the quarterback because, look, that's probably the most famous name in all of college football right now. So I want to start with Arch Manning. You recently had an article titled, "Arch Manning is college football's best quarterback, and we can prove it." Love that title, by the way. You make a much stronger case than a lot of other national analysts are willing to. So what's the one piece of evidence that you think people might be overlooking when they evaluate Arch Manning?
I do think it's important with Arch to kind of note that there's two very distinct phases of the 2025 Texas football season, and it was both for him individually, but also how the offense worked and how the offensive line in particular was constructed, where, you know, they entered the season having a pretty clear starting five, and then about 2 weeks before the season started, they had a new left guard coming in that we knew was battling, but we didn't think was going to win the job. And he didn't quite work out. By week 5. They were onto a different left guard, and that was a disaster. It's a big reason why they lost that Florida game, and just why they struggled early on was a lot of that offensive line play. Arch had a really bad game against Kentucky, which, you know, that's one of the biggest knocks on Texas, is that they played poorly against Kentucky and Mississippi State last year, and Arch Manning didn't look very good and kind of had to be saved by defense and special teams in that game. But if you look at November onward, which, you know, I'm a big believer that November is where real football is played, especially in the SEC and just around college football, where that's when your depth is getting tested. That's where injuries start to really matter. It's where players who are having to play through injuries have to show kind of what star power actually looks like. And Arch Manning was, just statistically speaking, you know, I like rate stats, I like advanced stats, I like also just total yardage. You look at yards per game, rushing and passing in the 300s, touchdown to interception ratio, and even fumbles lost and recovered. He wasn't turning the ball over, putting the ball in harm's way. He'll have a tendency to maybe throw a deep ball that is a little bit too contested, but that was coming with pretty good ball security, a lot of touchdowns, especially with his legs there, and good adjusted yards per attempt numbers, good grading when it comes to charting. He really finished the year about as well as any quarterback in the country. And I do think that, you know, that was for a video, so sometimes you got to let the clicks come in for that title. But I do think that outside of like Trinidad Chambliss, I don't think anyone really ended the year better, and that includes, you know, Dante Moore, who was expected to be the second overall pick if he had gone to the draft, or, you know, pick any other quarterback in the college game. Julian Sayin, who's efficient but not in a lot of volume, and a lot of it's up to do with scheme and the guys he's throwing to. So I do think it's fair to say, like, the back half of the year, Arch Manning, the one you saw in those last 6 or so games, was looking like the guy that you thought he would be coming into the season with that Heisman.
The bowl game, too, especially, you know, that kind of the last memory we have of him was really, really impressive. And I think you're right. The second half of the year, late in the year, he was really starting to put it together and starting to really look like the guy that I think we were all hoping for from day one that we would see, which is, let's face it, is not fair for any first-year starter, especially with the last name, the expectations that were put on this kid. It probably wasn't fair what we expected him to be right out of the gate. But, man, he really did flash down the stretch and played some really good football. And I think that's a big part of why people are so excited going into this year, is because I think we're all expecting that momentum to carry over into this year. You know, how much of your case for Arch Manning is based on what he did last year? You made a lot of points about last year and the end of the year. How much of it is based on that, and how much of it is a projection of what he'll become next season?
Yeah, I think saying that a lot of that is projection is fair, because you look at his overall numbers last year, and I think 2,800 yards passing, something like that, at least in the 12 regular season games. Nothing spectacular. Only one game with 350 plus. You know, that Mississippi State game was where they really had to score a lot of points to win that game. So it was not only that Arch was amazing game to game, especially at the start, but also his highs weren't these super outstanding, just blow your team out kind of games. And you don't get that as much when you're playing in the SEC. But either way, a lot of it does come from, well, he played well last year with arguably the worst O-line in the SEC, bottom 3 to 4 for sure, with not great pass catchers, like good but young and maybe a year away at most part. Carl Livingston was really the only productive one early in the year, and then it kind of switched back over to Wingo and eventually Emmett Mosley, but not Cam Coleman, who they're adding to this team, not Wingo with another year, Mosley healthier with another year. And also, it really helps to have a running game that adds for you. And I wrote an article recently that talked about how CJ Baxter and Trey Wisner, who really beloved players in that roster, but I think it was only 7 combined breakaway runs, or whatever term you want to use, 15 plus yard runs. They only had 7 of them. Relief Brown and Hollywood Smothers combined for 30 last year, right? Like 4 times the amount of explosiveness. So you're bringing in explosive running backs that make your life easier. Your O-line is going to be a little bit better, at least in pass protection. They might not move in the run game the way you'd like if you're a Texas fan, but they're going to protect Arch Manning. And we saw it against A&M, some of these plays he can make when he just gets a little bit of time. I think just the culmination of what a Steve Sarkisian offense at its peak can look like is why you're so excited for Manning, and why, I think it's reasonable for him to be a Heisman front runner, or at least one of the top 2. I don't think that, CJ Carr, who's secondary in a lot of these rankings, I think he's a great quarterback, but he's also someone who missed the playoff. He didn't have an outstanding year last year in his first year starting. So if there's a lot of question marks at who the best quarterback in college football is, I think Manning has as good an argument as anyone.
You mentioned Cam and you mentioned Ryan, and Cam Coleman I think he's a first time. Yeah, he's a first time transfer. How is it now versus last year coming into this year with this receiving roster? Like, how does it look now compared to last year? As you said, they were arguably probably the worst offensive line in college football. How is it now coming in with Hollywood and Ryan? Well, Ryan's always there, and then Cam as well.
One of the big storylines for Texas's receiver room last year is you look at the 2 previous seasons, and the year in 2023, it was Adonai Mitchell from the portal, and he wasn't this huge yardage guy, but just a winner, amazing contested catch player, go and get you touchdowns, red zone threat, deep ball threat, second round NFL pick. And then Matthew Golden the year after that from the transfer portal, a pretty unheralded guy out of Houston who ended up being a first round NFL pick, the only really explosive player on that offense in 2024. Texas didn't add from the portal outside of Emmett Mosley, who came in as a freshman, started the year injured, so he couldn't really establish himself in the starting offense. So there was a lot of hope, right? Like what Ryan Wingo looked really good as a freshman, showed a lot of promise, was a 5-star recruit. We're running him in as the number 1, which wasn't probably smart. Like he had to refine a little bit of what his game was. He needs to become a better route runner, needs to win better deep. And also too, there wasn't that much help besides him. DeAndre Moore returned, and he was good, but he's more of a slot role player. And then Parker Livingston in his second year as a redshirt freshman kind of made his way through and up past the other guys in his class and the other guys on the roster and found his way into a starting role. This year just feels much more defined. It's just so clear. Coleman, Wingo, Mosley, those are your starting 3. No matter what, that's how they're going to come out against, Ohio State and early in the year against Tennessee and Oklahoma when we get to SEC play. And Cam Coleman's going to win vertically and win one-on-one. Ryan Wingo is going to get you horizontal, right? Like finding ways to get the ball in his hands behind the line of scrimmage on little dump-offs, mesh plays, which Arch Manning's biggest weakness is actually that short area accuracy, which both of them need to get better at because Wingo has some hands problems. But it's just easier to project them being good because a little bit more confirmation about who these guys are. We know Mosley's a solid possession catch receiver, good hands. We know Wingo can be one of the most explosive in the SEC. Coleman, we've seen it. It's just the quarterback play has really hurt him the past 2 years. So it just feels like there's more guarantee that these guys will be good. And also don't write off Jermaine Bishop, who's a true freshman. He's actually playing cornerback right now, at least working with that position room. But this is one of the best Texas high school receivers that's ever come out, and he made his way to the Longhorns. Looks like he's going to play wide receiver, I think, but really, really good player.
To piggyback off of what you said about this receiving group, let's kind of bunch it together here. Is this the best group of skill players Sarkisian has ever had at Texas?
Yeah, I think the clear comparison is 2023, right? Like, how do you feel about Jonathan Brooks and the freshman CJ Baxter? I think Brooks is clearly the best of the 4 if you're including Brown and Smothers, but the duo of Brown and Smothers, I think, will be better. And they also have a true freshman in Derek Cooper, who they're very excited about. Receiver, really hard to beat. Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, and Adonai Mitchell. But if there was a group that could do that, it would be a very similarly formed team where you have that gritty, good blocking slot receiver, super, super exciting, high explosive play receiver. Wingo is, the bigger version of Worthy, while Worthy had just that more speed and agility. And then go get the ball receiver and Mitchell and Coleman. It comes down to that and how you feel about the tight ends. It's really a coin flip for me. I think it could be better than that 2023 team, and I think that this is probably the highest overall ceiling, top to bottom. But it's hard to beat Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks, Adonai Mitchell when you're talking about skill positions. If you want to have a decider from it, let's have Arch Manning's legs be part of the skill position equation, then I think I'd give it to you, because Quinn Ewers just never had that in his game the way Manning does.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, let's talk about Steve Sarkisian here, because we talked about Arch Manning. We talked about Sark. Sark is really considered one of the best offensive minds in football. Who has more pressure this season, Arch or Sarkisian?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it's probably Sarkisian, because even if it doesn't go optimally for Arch, and even if it's not perfect and it's not a Heisman and it's not a national championship, he's still probably going to the league and being a top 5 to 10 pick, even at the floor of what he is, just because he's a Manning. The physical tools are there. He's a naturally smart player. Just, if he's an inaccurate quarterback this year and he doesn't take that step, it wouldn't entirely surprise me. I think that it will get better, but maybe it doesn't quite go his way. For Sarkisian, I mean, there's a strong group of people that say, like, how is it ever going to get more talented than this team? Like, how are you going to tell me this is not the team you can win with if it's not this year with Simmons, or Colin Simmons defensively, and Trevor Gooseby at left tackle, and of course these playmakers we've talked about now. So I do think it's on Sark. I don't know if the NFL rumors have much validity to them from this past year, especially with what's been going on just in general. But if Sark wants to go to the NFL, he's got to show that he can do it in college first. So I think either he needs to do well because he wants another job, or needs to do well because you got to do it at Texas at some point. And this is probably the most talented team since at least 2009 and probably since 2005 when they won it all.
Quick shout out to our friends at props.cash, the best player prop research tool in the game. Props.cash lets you scan thousands of props across sports books to quickly spot the highest value opportunities. You get real-time injury and lineup intel, advanced filters to find exactly what you're looking for, and even correlated player props so you can see what tends to hit when a player goes over their line. They cover NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college football, college basketball, and the WNBA. It's legit next level prep. If you're serious about betting smarter, go to props.cash and use code PGF25 for 25% off your first month. That's code PGF25 for 25% off your first month at props.cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount.
So we kind of premised our launch of this conversation on the offense, and we haven't really talked about the defense. The defense really has a bunch of freshmen coming in, and they haven't had a lot of transfers in. So are they solid on what they have? They obviously they got transfers, but I think it's only 3. I think it's only 3 at the most part, and I think only 2 of them are starters. But are they solid defensively? Because we talked about them improving the offense. They improved the offensive line. We didn't talk about that, but they improved the offense a lot. Are they solidified on defense as well?
It's very fair to ask that question, because when's the last time Will Muschamp called plays, right? Like, first year as a defensive coordinator, I believe. He was doing it somewhat when he was a head coach, but mostly delegating. So, like, truly a defensive coordinator, it's been over a decade. And that's something to wonder about. Like, how is he going to do on game day? And what does that mean for his preparation? How is it different? I think generally Will Muschamp's a really good coach, and he's shown that for a long time, and that at the very worst motivation factor, he's going to get these guys ready to play. They're going to know the scheme. Pete Kwiatkowski was a very good defensive coordinator in his time at Texas. He had games where it was just off. Like against Florida, they were trying to contain DJ Lagway, who, even fully healthy, DJ Lagway is not much of a running threat. He was on a hobbled ankle, and they were just sitting back waiting for him to dice him up and letting their freshman wide receivers go one-on-one and out-athlete the cornerbacks. I don't think there's going to be those problems this year as much with game plan and scheme, which is going to be really nice for Longhorn fans. And also, because they brought back so much, there's so much that you can say is the same in a good way, even though the defense had its problems at the end of the year. You still have Colin Simmons, right, coming off the edge. Like, that's not changing. You still have probably the best edge rusher in the nation. Any third down, you are at the advantage because you have that player. You still have Hero Canoe and Alex January and Murad Watson stuffing it up in the middle at D-line. And one of those transfers that you were alluding to, Ian Gaffard, they're just very good at finding these nose tackles in the portal that just do the dirty work. He's only in for 15 to 20 snaps a game, but he will stuff the run in those plays. And then they're very excited about Rasheem Biles at linebacker, who came in from Pitt. We thought he was going to be kind of an Ohio State guy early on. He's from Ohio and just kind of keeps being quiet until eventually Texas really made a move for him. And he is an explosive athlete, really, really high sack and TFL numbers, finds his way in the backfield. So what you're most excited about for this defense is they're going to generate more turnovers and just more havoc than they have in the past few years. Now, will that come with some scheme unfamiliarity? That's the question. And how does that look with Muschamp, not with PK, who these guys have been recruited by and played with for a while? But I do think that they have the raw talent and a lot of cohesion from last year that they know about and they can really tap into. That this should be a good unit. I don't know if it's going to be the best in the SEC or anything like that. Top 3 is possible. Top 5 seems more likely. But if it's good and the offense is great, then you're talking about a very, very good team.
Yeah, I want to stick with the defense here for a second. You mentioned Will Muschamp coming over. I think that's the biggest question mark. It's a well-known name. We all know about Will Muschamp, his history of coaching. But with him running this defense now, I think there are some legitimate questions. But what's the biggest change that we should expect to see schematically?
So when you think of that Coach Boone defense and what's going on, what he has most of his hands on, it's the back 7 more so than the front 4, in my opinion, where he likes to coach linebackers. He loves to coach safeties and nickels. And you think about what Georgia's been doing for a while now with him in the reserves, but still on the staff, and just recruiting so many good linebackers, just as many as you can find. And state of Georgia, anywhere in the Southeast, like that's what their bread and butter is. But also they had really high level cornerback play for a lot of these years and have developed and recruited some great guys in the secondary. And this Texas team is going to play a lot more up in the face of receivers than they have in the past. If people who will tune into random Texas games will see these 3rd and 8 plays where they give up a first down at the sticks and the cornerback was backtracking. And it was just like, yeah, it was a little infuriating. Like, why are you playing so off, so soft in your cover 2 or your cover 3 when they need to get to the sticks? That's their one option. You have one of the best pass rushers in the nation. Let him go win his one and you stay hold and cover your guy. So they're going to play a little bit more man coverage. They're going to be in the face of the receiver more. That's why they got Bo Masco out of Rutgers, who I think is going to be a big hidden gem this year. A really good press man corner, has done it against good teams, played in the Big Ten. So those types of players are going to be a little more valuable in a Muschamp defense, those jam you, get in your face cornerbacks. And also, I do think they're going to play a little bit more multiple up front. It was mostly just 4 down with Pete Kwiatkowski, which is nothing wrong with that. But there's going to be a little bit of mint, getting three players in and having Gaffard really be the sole D tackle in there and being a true nose while you get a few more linebackers into play. And that's where Brad Spence, who was an Arkansas transfer last year, plays a bit of edge, plays a bit of linebacker. Sam is probably his best spot. That's where he can really thrive. And so the linebacker room is not super deep at Texas, but it's a lot of really good athletes and a lot of guys who can kind of just run around and have fun and make tackles and go shoot through gaps. So look for those 2 specific things with the difference between Muschamp and Kwiatkowski.
Real quick, I know you have another question, Brad, but when they hired Will Muschamp, was that a name that you had on your list of defensive
Big shock. Big shock for me. I didn't think it was impossible for Kwiatkowski to be moved along. I don't think he was at the top of the, Longhorn fans, the coaches that they don't like list. But, he had his issues at Texas. And I think Sark clearly has said that he wanted another head coach on the defense to deal with that side of the ball a little bit more. And that's obviously what Muschamp can do. So we were not ready for that to happen in the sense that, like, we had these pre-written articles, Muschamp's coming to Texas. Like it really, I mean, they announced the firing of Kwiatkowski and the hiring of Muschamp very quickly. So it was kept behind the scenes pretty well by this Texas staff. And we were just like, wow, that is a change. That is a shock. But you know what? You can buy into it. You can see why they're doing that kind of move.
Yeah, I think it kind of illustrates the pressure that this team is under to take that next step. We've talked about this roster, maybe the best roster in college football. It really is that deep. Where is the hole? Where are the weak spots for this team? Where are they going to show up? If there is any? I know they're loaded, but where's a spot you might have some concerns?
I think there's less concern about an individual spot 1 through 22 on each side of the ball. Like, is the left guard going to be bad like last year? Their left guard this year is expected to be Lawrence Seymour, who, 6-year senior, had to go through court filings to get him onto the roster. But that's a player who's coming in late. He did not early enroll, finished his degree at Western Kentucky. So I think one of the spots is clearly that interior. It's not a very massive group. Like, it's not a bunch of people movers at left guard through right guard. Connor Roberts in the center this is his first full year starting as a 5th-year senior. And he's a program player, a smart guy, not going to make a lot of mistakes, but just not a super menacing guy in the run game. That's not really Seymour's MO either. He's a pass protector. And Brandon Baker, who's coming over from right tackle into right guard, was recruited as a pass blocking right tackle. So that's where I'm a little bit like, there's not a lot of power on the interior. It was bad last year. There's some question marks about Kyle Flood, the O-line coach. So look out for the O-line and how much they can do at the goal line. Because Texas had some goal line red zone troubles these past few years. And are they going to be able to run the ball in? Can they run for power within 5 yards? How much of that has to be Manning with his arms or his legs? I'd keep an eye on that. Obviously, with a new defensive coordinator, it's like, are you going to be ready for week 2 against Ohio State? Are you going to be able to set that tone immediately? And I think they will pretty clearly. But I will say the linebacker core, the best players are similar players. Like, they're a little bit undersized. Go shoot through a gap, go run and get a guy, play really good coverage. But I wonder for these teams that play 12 personnel and stack and get really good running backs with really good O-line paired with them, how is Texas going to do when they're faced with just really hard-nosed running football? And Missouri is a game in the schedule that we've kind of circled as like a watch out, because that's a outside zone run team with arguably the best running back in the nation, and Ahmad Hardy, and their O-line's always good at Missouri. That's always what's going on with Eli Drinkwitz's team. Like, how are you going to do when a team just really wants to run the ball on you the entire game? So that's one on each side that I would keep an eye on for Texas.
You mentioned the game against Ohio State. We know that game feels enormous. Is it fair to say, is that a measuring stick game for this team? Or do you think that's a game where if Texas stumbles, they can still accomplish every goal they have? I think it's safe to say they could, but how big is that game? I know it's a non-conference game. They could still have a huge season in the SEC, make the playoff. We know all those things are still on the table, even if they lose that game. But as far as like the trajectory and the measuring stick aspect, is that a fair assessment or no?
I think you make a good point that, like, if they lost, it doesn't mean your season's over. Like, that doesn't mean you can't go and win your national championship. We've seen that with Ohio State 2 years ago against Michigan when they lost, and we were like, oh, well, that's Ohio State done. And nope, they won the national championship that year. I will say, if you were to canvass 1,000 Texas fans, I think a lot of them would say that this is the most important game of the year, and this is really the game that they have to get it done. Because if there's one thing you can say about the Longhorns over the past few years, it's that they've just shown that they're not quite that top tier team. They can't quite match up with the very upper echelon of college football. Really, Ohio State and Georgia are the two teams that you're trying to get to, and they haven't been able to beat either of them. That's 2 losses to Ohio State and 3 to Georgia in the past 3 years. So I do think it's a measuring stick. Like, this is a home game. It's Arch Manning's second year. You've built up this amazing roster. Everything seems like it's really come together for 2026 to be the season. And you get a chance to knock off probably a top 3 team at home, a team that everyone knows is good. There's no fluking win against Ohio State. It would really set the tone for the season, for the culture, for the kind of team they are, for the home fans. DKR does not get the respect it really deserves for these really big games, like these huge primetime matchups. I can understand the criticism when they're playing Kentucky and Mississippi State, but for a game like Ohio State, I think you're going to see DKR absolutely rocking a national primetime game like the whole country's going to see. And that could just do a lot for the confidence of everyone in the building. And that's why I do agree, like, this really it needs to be a win for Texas. They need to start out with this win, and we'll get into it, I assume. But that schedule behind it is really tough if you're coming in with 1 loss into a 9-game SEC schedule.
So I know we talked about how much pressure it is, and you said that Sarkisian probably has the most pressure. But as a fan, and I guess people that go to the school, there's been probably a 4-year window where you guys could have won it. And this is now the 5th year. So this 5th year, is the idea to win it, or is the idea to make the playoffs?
I think the default is to make the playoff in most people's mind. Like, it's not a negotiable to make the playoff or even win a game. I think for most people, they would be upset if they didn't make a national championship. For me personally, like, I understand that football is football, right, and it's a game of inches, and that fumble luck is real, and just things happen. Players make mistakes. It's not it's not impossible for the better team to lose. So if they lost to the national champion in the semifinals, like, could you really be upset about that? Some people would be, Frank. Like, I mean, that's how they would feel. This is the team. It has to be Texas this year. But that's also people who really only observe one team, and they know Texas. They know what a great Texas team looks like. But, I think that Oregon is a tremendous roster in the same kind of way that we're talking about Texas. Like, I think Oregon's going to have a great team. I think Notre Dame's going to be great. Of course, Indiana, Ohio State. Like, there's about 8 teams where I really am like, they all could truly compete for this national title coming in. And I think Texas is clearly a part of that. Better than last year, even though they had that number 1 rating last year, though they needed to be more competitive than they were. I do think it's the most likely team of the last 3 to 4 years for Steve Sarkisian, but I don't think it has to be a national championship. That's just not how it works, frankly. It's a tough sport. And also, he could just go back and make a great team in 2028, right? Like, every other year, he has this unreal roster. So I do think that most fans, if you'd ask them, they'd go, it needs to be a national championship appearance. The playoff is the baseline. But you got to be realistic about what's going on. And I do think that Texas could be out-dueled by a good opponent. But it just all stems from kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like, if you can beat Ohio State, then why can't you beat anyone else in the country?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's really a valid point. And I think sometimes fans get unrealistic expectations about winning titles. There's only one team that wins this thing, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, there's a lot of great teams. And I think more so than any other period in college football, there's more parity. And it's harder to win a championship in this era than it's ever been. With the 12-team playoff, it is a gauntlet. And with all the good teams you mentioned, I want to piggyback off of that, because when you look at Texas, you compare them to the Ohio States, the Georgias, Oregon, Notre Dame, some of these teams that are coming into the season with the truly elite rosters. Where does Texas truly have an advantage when you compare them to the other heavy favorites coming into the year?
I do think that the true star power, like we're talking about the 20 to 25 best players in the entire sport, is where Texas has that advantage on both sides of the ball, where you look at when Texas is in a big moment offensively, like, they really just need to get a first down, or they need to get a scoring drive. And it's mano-a-mano versus a great defense. At the end of the day, they think Arch Manning is the best quarterback in college football. Whether that's the case, we'll see. But, the quarterbacks are tough to evaluate. But we know that Cam Coleman is a first-round level talent, and there's a reason he was the number 1 overall guy in the portal. Unreal athleticism, unreal contested catch ability. He can track a football as well as anyone you'll see in college football. And then even Trevor Goosefield added that. Like, that is a franchise left tackle in the NFL. He's going to be playing football for a long time, playing tackle. He is going to be really good. He can shut down primary edge rushers. And we saw that last year. Texas A&M, Cassius Howell was a second-round pick, one of the best pass rushers in the country, was non-existent against Texas. I mean, Gooseby and that O-line down the entire game, but when he was one-on-one, he didn't win. And then on the other side of the ball, Texas has Colin Simmons, right? You need a stop, or you are up late and they're in a third down. He can just pin his ears back and go get the quarterback as well as anyone in the nation. I think he's better than Dylan Stewart. I would have that as him as my 101 edge rusher going into this year. So we're just talking about, like, Texas could have the number 1 quarterback, tackle, edge rusher, top 3 wide receiver on their roster, which a lot of teams will have a lot of good players. I don't know how many teams could say they have 4 of the top 20 to 15 players in the league.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think every one of those guys you just mentioned have a legitimate shot to be top 10 picks. And when you're talking about a team that has 3, maybe 4 guys who are legitimately could be top 10 picks in April, that really speaks to the high level talent on this team. I've got rapid fire questions. All right. So I've got rapid fire. First thing that comes to mind here. So, one word to describe Texas entering 2026.
I think energy. I think there's a lot of buzz in the program in Austin with the people who are at the very top, the names we're talking about. I think there's just a ton of energy and confidence from this team going in.
Now, we've talked about it, but let's solidify it here. Buy or sell, Texas has the best roster in college football.
You're putting me on the spot. The best roster, I think I will sell, because I think roster in general does mean more about the accumulation of talent and the number of players. And I think I would probably have Ohio State and Oregon, one of them at least, above Texas. Like, if you want to flip a 3-sided coin, either way, 2 out of those 3 would be those Big Ten teams. Like I talked about, I think Texas has that high level talent, but we mentioned it there. Like, the O-line is concerning to me. There's the linebacker construction's a little off. So I don't know if they are the best roster, but I do think they are in that top 3 discussion pretty clearly.
Over under 11 regular season wins.
Oof. I think I'm going to take the 11 right there. I mean, we're probably not going to go over that. That's just, you're doing. If you think they're going to be 12-0, I'd put all your money into Vegas as soon as possible if you truly think that. But you beat Ohio State, and the path to 11 doesn't seem that bad because you feel like you're better than every team on your schedule. You do miss Georgia, and frankly, like Texas's kryptonite has not been their rivals recently. It's been obviously that one Florida game, but it's been losing to Georgia and Ohio State and playing against these super high level teams. So I do think 11 is what the number is going to be. 10 feels very realistic. I would not be surprised if it's there too. And LSU gets the advantage or one of the rivals gets a win. But Texas has been solid against rivals. They've been good against teams that aren't Georgia and Ohio State. So that's why we keep saying it kind of comes down to how Ohio State goes. I will say 11 on the record, but I would not be surprised.
Will Arch Manning win the Heisman?
I think so. I do because I think that there's an inherent bias towards Arch Manning that will show up if it's close, right? Like if it's a close race, it's probably going to be Arch Manning. And I don't think it's going to be that hard for him to get to the podium and get to New York because there's just going to be more scoring for Texas. There's the total number of yards and touchdowns will be up there. And when you play those SEC games and you play those primetime games, we're talking about, if I'm staying close to what I've been saying this whole time, an 11-win team with one of the most explosive offenses and the face of college football, or more the name of college football than the face, but the most talked about guy. It's easy to put your money on that being the player that ends up taking home an award like that.
Will a Texas wide receiver then lead the SEC in receiving yards?
I don't think so. I think they're going to split it pretty efficiently. I've been on record saying this. I said it in our thread today that I think Wingo is going to end up with more yards than Cam Coleman because I just think he's more of a yardage receiver and that he's going to get some really explosive. He had multiple games of 75-plus yard, like screen pass touchdowns. So he'll be found over top. He'll be found on screens. He's just going to accumulate the yardage. But Coleman's going to get a lot more of those important yards, right? Where 15 yards in the first is not better than 7 yards on third down in the fourth, even though it shows up better on your stats for someone like Wingo. So I don't think they're going to lead. I think they're going to split a lot. Craver at A&M is going to get a lot of yards this year. He's a really good player. And at LSU, I think one of those guys, my early inclination is Jace Brown, but those are the two teams where I think they have some guys that are just going to kind of go off when it comes to the yardage.
As a program, is Texas pulling away from the rest of the SEC?
They're not even ahead of Georgia yet. That's the problem with Texas right now. You cannot claim that you're ahead of Georgia with how they've been playing and how Georgia's won the SEC these past few years. So I do think that you can make a very strong case for Sark as the second or third best head coach, and Texas is probably the best at acquiring talent, but that's got to be wins. So that's at the end of the day how important it is for Texas.
Biggest threat to Texas this season?
On the schedule?
Yeah.
I think Ohio State pretty clearly. That's the best team. But LSU at night is, you're probably going to be playing in Death Valley on the road, and that's not going to be a fun one. That game might be at 3:30 if I'm remembering correctly, but either way, Death Valley, LSU, this Kiffin team, I think is going to be a big tough one.
Boldest prediction for the Longhorns this season?
Ooh, I think they're going to lead the SEC in turnovers. I think they're going to be the team, and that doesn't inherently mean you're the best defense, but they were pretty close last year. I think they were second or third last year with some flaws on that roster with the defense and the scheme, and I think with Muschamp coming in, really emphasizing the ball more, they're gonna be first in turnovers force in the SEC. Okay,
last rapid fire, and then Alex will get his Arch question in. National championship team, yes or no? Yeah, I think so. I think they're one of the 3 to 4 that I would have firmly there. Like I said, I think if I had to guess right now, and I see the credentials in the back, I've been saying that I think Oregon's probably the team that I would put my money down on if I were a betting man. But I do think Oregon-Texas feels like it could be a very fun finale, and I think that's the two teams I would have in my championship game. I actually text Brad on it and asked if he listened to it. And it's about the draft, and it's about Arch Manning and Dante Moore. And these two guys, prominent guys at that, took Dante Moore over Arch Manning. And they said Arch is still good. This is not about dimming Arch's light at all. It was just these two guys that are going to be at the top of the class, probably top 5 picks, both of them. How would you grade what they said over and Dante Moore over Arch Manning? They were talking about how he throws the ball, how he throws his deep ball, how soft it lands in the receiver's hands, and so on and so forth. I think Moore's accuracy makes him a lot safer right now, and why it felt like when we were talking about the draft process that him being the number 2 pick was very written in, but Arch was more of a, if he declared, would he be the number 2 pick? I think so. But I do think that right now it's fair to have Moore ahead of him because, those seam shots, those right in the basket to a tight end and throwing it over the defense, it's just more refined than Arch's right now. Moore's a better deep ball thrower. It's more accurate. He's better at hitting a sideline shot.
I do think Arch is clearly the better improviser of the two, making a play out of nothing, using his legs to find either a first down there through the run game or finding guys on the out routes when the play is broken. He's got to be more accurate. I do think his ceiling is probably higher than Moore's as an NFL quarterback. The size, the speed, the arm strength, some of the mental makeup with it. But it's not crazy to say that coming in. Like a lot of these draft guys, they don't really have biases. Like why would they care about what the actual college football season goes like? And B, like they're just saying what's been on tape. They care about the tape, and the tape is better for more overall. I do have concerns about him in those big games. I think he's had some big time moments that just haven't quite gone his way, and either Oregon wins, and I don't think he's the main reason, or they don't win, and it feels like he didn't fully show up. So I think that's my thing. Like, can Arch be more accurate and better in the down to down, and can Moore have these signature wins and these signature games where he is clearly the best player on that field?
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with you. I think right now, just based off the evidence that we have before the season starts, I think Dante would have a slight edge, but I'm with you. I think Arch has the higher ceiling, and I think we're going to see it this year. I think he's going to take another step and solidify himself as the best player in college football. I think the ceiling is just tremendous. And I think, like we talked about earlier, to come full circle here, the end of the season last year, the progression we saw from him has to be really, really promising, because we really started to see those steps. One of the players I'm most excited to see this year for sure. Once again, guys, we have been excited to be joined today by Evan Vieth. He's a reporter for Inside Texas, covering all things Texas Longhorns for On3. Be sure to check out his work over there at Inside Texas, and give him a follow on X, Twitter, of course, at Evan Vieth. Evan, thanks again for taking the time to join us, man. We'd love to have you back on sometime.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's been a great time. I'd love to come back.
Thank you,
awesome,
man.